You're the people who make elections happen. We cannot, we dare not take the work of poll workers for granted. And I think we do. But the work of poll workers, unencumbered, without intimidation, without threats, should be a commitment that we all have.
Today, Vice President Kamala Harris keeping the momentum going against the GOP-led assault on voting rights with an onslaught of voter suppression bills. Harris met with poll workers and election officials about their experiences, the message they want to spread about why election professionals need to be protected, and how the bills are putting in danger their jobs of protecting democracy. Joining us now is Symone Sanders, Senior Advisor and Chief Spokesperson to Vice President Kamala Harris. Welcome, Symone. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Senator. I heard some folks calling you Claire, and I was like, oh, no, she will always be Senator to me.
Claire's okay. That, in many ways, Claire makes me feel younger, Symone. We know that's important, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me what the Vice President learned today, and how is it going to inform what she's doing behind the scenes to see if we can get this thing moving?
So today was an extremely important meeting for the Vice President. This is a meeting she requested to have because, as you heard her say in that opening clip, we dare not take for granted the work of poll workers in America. She talked about in that meeting all of the times that she went to vote. And a poll worker is the person that greeted her, helping her out, telling her where to go and what to do. And right now, there are many threats to voting rights currently. And one of those threats is the right to be able to cast that ballot, but also the right to be able to have that ballot counted, and how poll workers are critical to each of those places and spaces in each of those steps. So she heard from poll workers and a current election official who is a former poll worker about the threats that they are facing, but also the progress that is being made across the country in their own personal experiences.
The New York Times explained today in a story about how the GOP proposed restrictions will impact election workers. They said this: both bills would ban 24-hour voting and drive-through voting, prohibit election officials from proactively sending out absentee ballot application to voters who have not requested them, increase the criminal penalties for election workers who run afoul of regulations, limit what assistance can be provided to voters, and greatly expand the authority and autonomy of partisan poll watchers. I know how hard it is to find these poll workers. I mean, there is always an effort in churches, in community groups, in the months leading up to elections. This is not a high-paid job. This is primarily some people who volunteer because they want our democracy to work better. Did the people that the Vice President met with today feel threatened? Did they talk about feeling threatened with criminal prosecutions?
Folks in the meeting detailed their various experiences. One of the former poll workers, now a current election official, was from Maryland and talked about what happened in Maryland and how they safely and accurately administered their elections. They didn't have many issues, but that they, as poll workers, watched how across the country, in places like Michigan, in places like Philadelphia, in places like Georgia, poll workers were threatened. The Vice President, what she heard in this meeting today, built off meetings, Senator, that she's been having all across the country. Specifically, Vice President Harris was in Detroit last week and met with folks who were poll workers and election officials who were there, who detailed their own stories about how right outside of the very building that the Vice President was having that meeting in on Monday was where folks tried to force their way into the building, claiming election fraud and saying they didn't trust the votes to be counted. They talked about how they were scared, but also talked about how they have often in elections talk about election security and the need to secure elections, but now they've started talking about security for themselves, but they feel undeterred in the charge that they have going forward. And so really that's why these meetings are so important. That's why the work that the administration is doing, led by the Vice President, is so important. She has spent her entire career, first as a district attorney in San Francisco, then as Attorney General of California, then as a United States Senator from California, and now as Vice President of the United States, fighting to defend the the rights of all people. And the president and vice president are absolutely committed to fight to defend the right to vote on all fronts. So that's federal legislation, that's in the courts, that's in the streets, if you will, talking to people, convening folks, and also at the ballot box and empowering voters so that they know that we cannot let up and that your vote is your voice. It's about power. And I'll end with something Vice President Harris often says. She says, people are asking me, why are you talking about voting, Vice President Harris? We just voted. And the reality is that people are trying to take the people's power. And that's because when we vote, things change. Folks went to the polls in 2020 and they got $1,400 checks. They now have a monthly child tax credit thanks to the work of the president and vice president. We have an administration that is fighting to protect voting rights. This is what happens when we go to the polls. So this is really about ensuring that people know that the president and vice president are not letting up, that they do believe that we need to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and that they're doing everything in their power to continue to elevate this conversation.